All right, so what times 12 and 24? 2. So what's my numerator now? 22. 2 times 11. What times 8 is 24? 3. So the new numerator is 9. And 22 minus 9 is what? 13. All right, you guys know how to do that, right? Okay, we're going to do that with these rational expressions that we have. Okay, exact same thing. We're going to figure out what the common denominator is. We're going to rewrite the two fractions with the new denominator, the common denominator, and then we will add or subtract them. Same procedure. Okay? Now, just a quick review. How do I simplify this fraction? What's my x is going to be? 6, where? Top, right? What goes into 4 and 12? 4. So 1 up top and 3 in the bottom. Right? That's what we did yesterday, right? What do I got to do to this first to simplify it? Factor the bottom, right? It's a difference of squares. How does it factor? Wendy, you paying attention?
Yeah.
Right. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 1 is a 1. Plus and minus, right? Can I simplify it? X minus 1's cancel, right? So what's my answer to that one? Not just x plus 1. 1 over x plus 1, right? Oh, we didn't say what makes it undefined, right? Forgot that part. 0 makes that one. 0, right? Thanks. And -1 makes that a 0, and +1 makes that a 0. Remember, you got to do both of them, right? So get rid of that. Do this. Move this over a little bit. Okay? So that's just a quick review of what we had on yesterday's quiz, right? Okay, so we're going to have to, do that stuff still to help us after we add or subtract. You still have to simplify your answer, just like we did on the quiz yesterday. Okay? So, today we're just going to add and subtract. We'll do the complex ones tomorrow. Okay? So, again, we just did that. All right? You got to have a common denominator, and all you do is add the numerators. The denominator stays the same, right? We don't add the denominators when we add or subtract. It's got to be the same number, and it stays the same thing. Just add numerators or subtract numerators. Okay, just like we did on that little warm-up. Okay. We got a common denominator already, so can I add those? Yeah. Right? So what's x plus x? X plus x? 2x. What's -3 plus a -2? -5. So my numerator is going to be 2x minus 5. Come on. Over x plus 4. What's the restrictions? What makes the denominator 0? -4, right? So we're going to write x cannot equal -4. So if you already have the common denominator, it's real easy. Just combine like terms in the numerator. Okay, that makes sense? So that's what they're going to look like. Will they always have the same denominator, though, when we start? No. We're going to have to turn them into the same denominator. Okay? All right, this one, another one, it's subtraction. So, what's my numerator going to be? -3x, good. -5. Okay? 3x minus 6x is a -3x. -4 minus 1 is -5, right? What if that was a -1 there? What's negative 4 minus a negative 1? That's negative 3, right? So pay attention when you have subtraction to the minus and negative stuff. Okay? Stuff that you know, but sometimes we get in a hurry and we... Now, what's my restriction? What makes this 0? If you're not sure, what can you do? No. You could try to factor that, but it won't factor because that's addition, right? If it's minus, I could factor. Set it equal to 0. If you can't see in your head right away what makes it equal to 0, write it equal to 0 and solve it. What's going on there? What did you say? An I, yeah. Can we use that as a... And we're going to take the square root of both sides, right? And the square root of negative 1 is I, right? So you wouldn't have to, there's no number that makes that equal to 0. No real number. There's an imaginary number, but no real number. Okay? So if you're not sure, again, listen to me. Some of you missed this or just don't even do it because, I don't know what it is. All right? It's not that hard. Just set the denominator equal to 0 if you can't tell what's going to make it 0, and then solve that equation. And again, sometimes there isn't an answer. There isn't a real number that makes it equal to 0. Okay? So those are easy ones, right? When we already have a common denominator, we just combine like terms in the numerator. Okay? When we have to figure out what the common denominator is, it takes a little more time. It's not that hard, it just takes some time. You got to be patient, right? So, least common multiples of polynomials, that's like the least common denominator, okay? So, they gave us this example as if this was a denominator. You had to factor it, okay? Well, this factors into x times x plus 3 times another x plus 3. So if you have two of the same thing, you're supposed to use the exponents. That's why they have the 2 here. Okay? It says, list the different factors. If the polynomials have common factors, use the highest power of the common factor. Okay? So the way I say it is whatever shows up is what you write down. Okay? Once you have the denominators factored. If something shows up, write it down. If it shows up more than once, you don't have to write it more than once. If you've got exponents for something, you write down the higher exponent. Like if x squared showed up and an x cubed showed up, you would write down the x cubed, the higher exponent. Okay? If an x minus 1 shows up, you write it down. If an x minus 1 shows up again on the other side, you don't have to write it down again. So whatever shows up after you factor the denominators, and that's all we factor to start, denominators. Okay, Sydney? Don't factor numerators until you get it down to a single fraction. All right? And that's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to say, I can see that I can factor this numerator. Don't do it. Just factor denominators. Figure out your common denominator. Then we're going to rewrite our numerators. Then we're going to add or subtract, whatever we're supposed to do. Once we get it down to a single fraction, then we're going to look to factor the numerator so we can try to simplify the fraction like we did yesterday's quiz. All right, so here we're just looking for least common multiple. All right, so what are the factors of 4? 2 times 2, right? How about 6? 2 times 3, right? All right. So if these were my 2 denominators, least common multiple and least common denominator is the same thing. right? I write down whatever shows up. What shows up? A 2, an X, a Y, and a 3. All right? Actually, I should write that as 2 squared, right? Now, you're supposed to write down whatever shows up. It doesn't have to show up in both. If it shows up on one or the other, you still write it down. If it shows up more than once, you don't have to write it down more than once. And then you write the highest exponent of each thing that showed up. So, I got a 2 squared and a 2. What's the higher exponent? The squared, right? There's no exponent for the 3. I got an x squared and an x to the 4th. What's the higher exponent? 4. I got a y cubed and y to the 5th. Which one's the higher exponent? 5th. So the common multiple, or least common multiple, or least common denominator would be 2 squared 4 times 3, 12, x to the 4th, y to the 5th. That's what these rules were saying to do. Okay? It's easier to explain it when you do one. Okay, that one we didn't have to factor either one. There's no pluses and minuses. We didn't have to factor it first. It's already factored. Okay, and that's what they're showing you here. Okay. 12x to the 4th, y to the 5th. So they did the same thing I did. Okay. Here we got 2 trinomials. Are these factorable? Yeah. And again, you guys are getting this mixed up. You guys are looking at this and then figuring this out. Look at this one first. What are the factors of this number that add to give me the middle number? Some of us are thinking, what adds to give me that? You cut like backwards. What multiplies to give me that? What multiplies to give me this? All right? So, there's only 2 factors of -3. -3 and 1, or 3 and -1. Which one did I want? The top one, because we want the -2, right? For 6, there's a few extra. You know, I got 6 and -1, or -6 and 1, -2 and 3, or 2 and -2, right? We got 4 possibilities. Which possibility do I want? This last one, right? You guys okay with that? We should know that by now, right? But some of us were getting a little stuck on something like that yesterday on the quiz. Okay, so they did that for us here. All right, they factored them. Okay, so what shows up? An x minus 3 shows up. An x plus 1 shows up. An x minus 3 shows up again. Do I have to write it down again? No. An x plus 2 shows up. So I need to write down those 3, the red, blue, and this green one. Are there any exponents that I have to worry about? No. If this red one was a 1 and this black one was a 2 for the exponent, I'd have to use the 2 exponent, the higher exponent. Okay? So my common denominator for these 2, if these were the denominators, these 2 trinomials would be these 3 factors. Okay? If it shows up, what are you supposed to do? Write it down for the denominator. Remember, when we first started today, you knew you had to have a common denominator to add or subtract fractions, right? You still have to have a common denominator to do this. Okay? Again, they factor these out. So what's the common denominator going to be? 2 squared times 3 times x to the 5th times y to the 7th, right? The higher exponent ones, whatever shows up, all right? How do I factor this left one? What do we call that? Difference of squares. How do we factor it? Louderson? Right, x plus 2, x minus 2. Square root of 4 is 2, right? Square root of x squared is x, right, Nicole? Plus and a minus. What are the factors of positive 6 that add up to positive 5? No. 1 plus 6 is 2 and 3, right? 2 times 3 is 6, positive, right? X plus 2 showed up twice. Do I have to write it down twice? No. So x minus 2, x plus 2, x plus 3 would be my common denominator. Is this making sense? This is what we're going to do. They're going to start putting these as denominators in a problem. We're going to have to factor those. And then we're going to have to write down whatever shows up to make our common denominator. Okay? So, again, 6 is 2 times 3, 10 is 2 times 5. Okay, what showed up? A 2, a 3, and a 5. Well, 2 times 3 times 5 is 30. That's how those 30s showed up. What times 6 gives you 30? 5. So 2 times 5, 10. Just like the warm-up, right? What times 10 gives you 30? 3. So 3 times 3. Then you add the numerators. The denominator doesn't change once you get the common denominator. Okay? We've already done this today, right? Just a quick review again. We're going to do this same procedure with these rational fractions, these trinomials and binomial fraction stuff. Okay? I got to factor this bottom. Don't worry about the numerator. We're not going to factor any numerators to the very end. What factors of negative 4 add up to positive 3? Negative 1, positive 4, right? So, I just rewrote these two fractions in factored form. That one won't factor, so that didn't change at all. Everybody okay so far? Looking at this denominator and this denominator, what's the common denominator going to be? That it? Both of those, yeah, both of them. X plus 4 and x minus 1. What did I tell you? Whatever shows up, write it down. Okay? It doesn't have to show up in both. If it shows up on one side or the other, you've got to write it down. You with me? Okay. All right, so looking at this original denominator, in my common denominator, do you see anything different? They're exactly the same, right? So do I need to do anything to that numerator? No. This denominator, I had to multiply by x minus 1 to make it look like this one, right? To be the same. So I multiplied the x plus 4 times x minus 1. I have to do the same thing to the numerator. Isn't that what we did back here? What did I multiply 6 by to get 30? 5. So I multiplied 2 times the same thing to get to 10. Right? Isn't that what we did? John, stay awake. So I multiplied this denominator by x minus 1. So I have to multiply this 2x, that old numerator, by x minus 1. Whatever you do to the bottom, you got to do to the top. Same procedure. How do I multiply these two? No, distribute. Yeah. just gonna go 2x times x and 2x times -1. Questions on the procedure? We're doing it on the next page. All right, so this is gonna be 2x squared minus 2x. This side's x minus 3. All over the common denominator, which does not change now. So that's what we're doing right now. That's on this next slide. You with me? Questions? All right, so they combined the like terms already. Remember, this was 2x squared minus 2x. So the 2x squared's there. The 1x minus the 2x. So we got the -1x. And then there's the -3. Now is the point where you would try to factor the numerator, if possible. Okay? And I believe it factors into this. I'll check here. This would be, no, I don't think it does actually. There's no factors of -3 with this 2x squared that'll give me -1. Wait a minute. Yeah, maybe it is. Let me check. First is 2x squared, outside is 2x, inside is -3x. Yeah, that works. Hang on. So, can I reduce this? Are there any factors up here that can cancel with these factors? Well, is that these both the same? No, they're not quite, but sometimes they will be. Once you get it factored, you'll be able to do what we did on yesterday's quiz. Right, so you can leave it in that form over that, or you want to leave it this way. Usually, if you can factor, leave it in factored form. Okay, remember, you look at these two things to see what makes it 0. So remember, we just say this, right? -4 would make that a 0, +1 makes that a 0. Questions? Went really slow through that. It's not that difficult, it takes some time. I told you that at the beginning. Okay. Look at another one. Can I factor either denominator? Yeah, which one? The right one. What's it factor to? X plus 2, x minus 2, right, Danny? Any questions so far? What's my common denominator, Grant?
X plus 2.
Right. X plus 2 showed up and x minus 2 showed up. Right, Everly?
Yeah.
So we write them both down for the common denominator. Okay? Remember, if it shows up in either denominator, you write it down. If it shows up more than once, like the x plus 2 did, do you have to write it down more than once? No. So that's my common denominator. So I'm going to have to multiply this one on the left by x minus 2. So what do I have to do to that x? By the same thing, right? Got to multiply it by x minus 2. That's what they're doing here. Same procedure. Okay, how do I multiply these? Distribute. So x squared minus 2x. So x squared minus 2x plus a -8. None of those are like terms. So that's my numerator. X squared minus 2x minus 8 over x plus 2 and x minus 2. It's on the next page. Are there factors of -8 that add up to -2? Good. Guess what? We can simplify. What's my answer?
X minus 4, X minus 2.
Right, x minus 4 over x minus 2. What are my two restrictions? 2 and negative 2, right? Zach? Yeah. Don't forget about your restrictions. Some of you forgot yesterday. That whole thing's the answer. Again, don't factor numerator till when?
The bottom.
So you get it into one fraction, right? Only factor denominators. There will be some problems in the beginning that you could factor numerators. Don't do that. That just messes you all up. Pay attention to these details. Again, it's not that difficult. It just takes a little bit of time. And kids get messed up sometimes. All right, go ahead and try that one. We'll see how you do.
Oh, I was throwing it pretty far. Yeah, he had a horrible form though.
Gotta work on your spend.
My what?
You spend?
No,
that's
Just
do like this.
Yeah.
I have no idea how to do
First time. It was bad form.
Horrible.
It was horrible, that's why.
I know.
it. But
And then just like this.
My
But
desk,
it's pretty
my desk was like
awkward.
a lot warmer. I think you're.
No, that's very hard. No. No.
I really wanted to see Jeff grow.
to the 17th.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I literally was like.
Jeff is actually Jason.
GCF.
If I were to keep Jeff for so long.
No, we literally went there. I'm not getting free, and then it's like big like it. No, I know.
Come on, we should be working. I know you guys are all talking about your problem, right?
He's so scary.
I love this song. Oh, that's a good one.
He looks like Dave, like, remember Noel? What do we do?
You guys should switch that.
Jeff for. No way.
I don't know.
It's X minus 1. It's X minus 1.
I'm gonna ask her about. What am I doing?
All right, let me help you out. Okay, let's refocus. I'm glad you guys are really excited to get and try one. Right? GCF for both? 2 goes into both of those, 3 goes into both of those, right?
Oh.
Isn't that what would happen when I pull out the GCF? So what's my common denominator? What shows up? Okay, x minus 1 shows up. What else shows up? 2 and 3. Right? What is 2 times 3? That makes sense? Is that what I told you to do? Whatever shows up in the denominator, write it down. So I write down the 2, the 3, and the x minus 1. Well, I can multiply 2 times 3 and make it 6, right? If you want to write it as 2 times 3 times x minus 1, that's okay. Now, look at the original denominator. All right, just look at this one right now and this one. What did I do to this one on the left to get this? Multiply by 3. So what's this numerator? 9x. Look at this one and this one. What did I do to it? Multiply by 2. So what's this going to be? Right. I'm going to multiply 2 times 3x and 2 times negative 2. Questions? Isn't that the procedure we just talked about? Factor denominators. Whatever shows up as a factor, write it down for the common denominator. Whatever you did to the original denominator, you do to the original numerator when you rewrite your fractions. What's 9 plus 6? 15. X. Can I factor this numerator? Now I can look to factor the numerator. Is there a GCF? No. So it's only got 2 terms. If it's got 2 terms, it's probably a difference of squares. Is that a difference of squares? No, so you're done. You can't go any further. What's the restriction?
Negative 1.
No, positive 1, right? If I put a positive 1 there, I get 0. All right. Okay? Any questions? Now's the time to ask.
Yeah, I don't understand how you're getting the new denominator.
Okay, whatever shows up, you write down. A 2 showed up, an x minus 1 showed up, and a 3 showed up. If it's the same thing shows up again, I don't have to write it down. So when I multiply the 2 times the 3, that's where the 6 came from. Okay, so once you factor like we did, write down the factors that showed up. It doesn't have to show up in both sides. If it shows up on either side, you write it down. Remember, if there were exponents, Andrew, if there were exponents on these x minus 1s, like a 2 and a 3, which one would I use? The 3, the bigger one. We talked about that, right? That doesn't happen very often, but if it does, write the bigger exponent when you have the same thing. All right? How am I going to factor this?
X minus 3 plus 3 x minus 3.
Good. What's the common denominator?
X minus 3.
Right. This is going to be the common denominator, right?
Yeah.
So what do I have to do to this denominator?
Multiply.
By what?
X minus 3.
X minus 3, right? So what do I do to the numerator?
X minus 3.
X minus 3. You with me on that? That's what they're doing here, right? Now, how do I multiply those two? What do we call it? FOIL, right? What happened? Just,
He done did it.
it just, did the old, freeze up on me. All right, so this is where this came from, when they foiled that. Okay, now watch. What's gonna happen here? 2x squared minus 1x squared. X squared. Nothing minus 2x is what? Negative 2x. Negative 30 minus a negative 15.
Negative 45.
No. Negative 15. What's minus a negative gonna do? Add. So it's actually gonna be negative 30 plus 15, right? So remember that. Minus a negative is addition, right? I don't know if it'll let me go to the next one. Yeah, it is. Okay? So they switch the signs, what we just talked about. All right, when they combine like terms, you got x squared minus 2x plus, or minus 15. Factored it, what happens with the x plus 3's?
They cancel.
They cancel. So there's my answer. What's x? What's x not allowed? It's not gonna let me. What's x not allowed to eat? 3 and?
Negative 3.
Yeah, remember, it's both of those before you simplify. Okay? Same procedure every time. Factor denominators. Whatever shows up, write it down for the common denominator. Right?
Yes.
I'm gonna start confiscating all your phones.